Zoom's having technical difficulties, so I'm just checking to see if we're streaming.
Yep, yeah.
Yes, we are now.
There we go. Perfect. All right, and we have a quorum. So good morning, everyone. I am Representative Tiffany Roberts. We'll be presiding over this work session of the Joint Standing Committee on Innovation, Development, Economic Advancement, and Business. I don't think this format's quite new to all of us, but we do expect there will be some unforeseen glitches and maybe a little snafus here and there, so please be patient. We're doing our best and we'll all learn as we go. The purpose of this meeting is for the committee to receive information from staff and others in order for members to consider legislative proposals before them and make recommendations or reports to the legislature. Only committee members, the committee analysts, and those specifically invited to attend will be participating in the work session using Zoom. For members of the public wishing to observe this meeting, it's being live streamed on the committee's YouTube channel. It'll also be recorded after the meeting is concluded. We're also broadcasting the audio of this live on the legislature's website, which is legislature.maine.gov. So some reminders: the YouTube live stream of this meeting, which is accessible to the public, begins at the scheduled start time for the work session, will remain on until the end of the day's work. If your video or your audio is on, even if the committee is not in active session or on break, the public can see you and can hear you. Please remember to mute your microphone when you're not speaking. And everyone knows by now how to name themselves, so we're good there. This is a public meeting. I must remind you that while we are meeting, a discussion must happen on screen and not by way of the Zoom chat. So that should be turned. We were having some issues with that, but we don't want to communicate there. You may use the chat to request or speak or indicate you're having a technical issue. Or to indicate that you're momentarily stepping away from the screen. However, again, you are not to use the chat feature for substantive discussions. If you're having technical difficulties, please contact Ms. Reed, our committee clerk, who will try to help resolve the problem, or contact the Legislative Information Technology Office if necessary. Okay, members will speak at leave of the chair by using the raise hand function in your Zoom. Materials shall be provided electronically for this meeting, either through the screen share, email, or posted on the committee materials page before the meeting or soon after. When it comes time for the committee to vote, we must have a quorum present, at least 7 members, including a senator. In order to be counted as present, we must be able to see you on the Zoom screen. So with that, let's call on members to introduce themselves. Starting with, is Valerie here?
I'm here.
You are? Everyone keeps moving around.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Representative Valerie Geiger. I represent District 93, Rockland and Owl's Head.
Good morning. My name is John Andrews. I represent District 73 in Western Maine, which is Buckfield, Hebron, and Paris. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Sarah Pepworth. I have the honor of representing House District 133, Blue Hill, Brooksville, Brooklyn, Cascade, Sedgwick, and Surrey.
Good morning. I'm Amanda Collimore. I represent House District 106, Pittsfield, Clinton, and Detroit.
Good morning, Representative Jack Ducharme, representing House District 111, Madison, Solon, and Norwich Walk.
Good morning, Maine. I'm Representative Sue Austin, hailing from my hometown of Gray. I also have the pleasure of representing portions of Raymond, Casco, and I have all of Fry Island in Big Sebago Lake.
Representative Tavis Hassenfuss here, representing Winthrop, Reedfield, and part of Monmouth.
Good morning, everyone. Reagan LaRochelle from House District 86, representing part of Augusta.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Representative Sue Bernard, and I have the pleasure of representing Caribou, New Sweden, and Westmanland. Good morning, everyone.
You're on mute, Senator.
Good morning. I'm Senator Chip Curry, and I represent the 26 rural, coastal, and island communities of Waldo County.
Again, I'm Representative Tiffany Roberts. I represent House District 6, which is the majority of North Berwick and South Berwick, and I am your House Chair. We also have with us our committee clerk, Ms. Eva Reed. Ms. Reed, if you want to just pop on for a second. She's having internet issues, so there she is. Okay. And we also have Ms. Rachel Olson, our OPLA analyst, who will be walking us through work sessions today. So with that, I will now open the work session on LD 1694, which is an act to create the Maine Redevelopment Land Bank Authority. Ms. Olson, do you want to go through this first before we call the sponsor in to explain any changes she's made, or?
Sure. I'm just going to update the committee on sort of where we stand with the bill. So LD 1694, an act to create the Maine Redevelopment Land Bank Authority, was a carryover bill for this committee. We received this bill very late at the end of last session. And I think given the consideration the committee wanted to give to this, as well as time for sponsors, the committee requested the bill to be carried over. So I shared the bill analysis that I created last session, although I don't believe that we really had a full work session on the bill. So I'm not sure we went through the bill analysis very in depth. And I'll also note the sponsor had submitted an amendment at the time, and also has the same amendment with additional amendments from work conducted in the interim that she has shared with the committee. And I believe, and I know Representative Sachs is here as well. So that's kind of where we stand on it. A couple of individuals have submitted updated testimony. So just have a couple of notes. MMA, as of my last check, Neil Goldberg from MMA submitted an updated updated testimony in support of the bill. And I'll just note as well that DECD testified orally at the end of last session, neither for nor against. And so there's no written testimony in the portal. And in speaking with them, I don't believe they have any updated testimony to submit at this time, although they are present with us today as well. And so, yeah, I think that's a good update. Happy to answer questions about where we stand, but otherwise I think I'll hand it off.
Do you have the updated amendment?
I do. I have it. And I also emailed it out, and I think Representative Sachs has emailed it out, and I think it's in the portal as well. So I can certainly post the amendment for us all to see if that's what you would like to do at this time.
I'm wondering if just a quick refresher of your bill analysis would be helpful for the committee.
Sure. I'm going to put it on the screen. Yes. Oh,
yep. Representative Bernard.
Thank you very much, Chair Roberts. I just had a quick question, and that is the testimony that was resubmitted by Yellow Light Breen. Was this after he had the opportunity to see the amendments? Do you know?
From MDF, or do you mean Neil Goldberg from MMA?
From MDF.
The Maine
Yellow Light Breen, right?
So Maine, no, it's MDF, Maine Municipal Association. That's who I'm referring to. We may be talking about two different things.
I'm sorry, I thought you said that MDF, Yellow Light Breen, had, no, I'm saying it wrong.
Yeah.
Sorry.
It's okay. No, it's okay. Neil Goldberg from Maine Municipal Association submitted updated testimony in regards to 1694. And I noted that DECD, they testified neither for nor against last year, and they have no updated testimony at this
Right. I'm sorry, did you say anything at all about MDF and how they felt about this bill?
I have not this morning. Let me take a look at the list to see if they had submitted testimony. Ann Ball from the Maine Downtown Center at MDF submitted testimony originally. And that's just quickly looking at my list of individuals who testified last session.
Okay, I may have just misunderstood. I'm so
Yep.
sorry.
No, that's okay.
Okay.
I
Representative,
may have misspoke.
Representative Deschamps, did you have a question before she does the bill analysis or for after?
I just wanted to point out that the bill, the documents and the testimony and so forth is not available on the portal. You have to kind of go through the back door and find that. And I don't know that I can necessarily pull up the actual testimony or copies of the bill analysis or anything like that. I don't recall seeing the bill analysis. So so that's, for me, that's makes it difficult, but I couldn't bring it up through the portal, just so you know. Wanted you to know.
I believe Ms. Olson's gonna go over that now, and then if we need to access it beyond that, I'm sure she can direct us.
Yes, I just popped a link into the chat box that'll take you to the testimony for 1694. You'll have to close we had two bills that day. You'll have to close the top one and open 1694 to pull up the testimony. So you should be able, if you wanted to go to the testimony. I emailed the bill analysis out to members at the very start of today's meeting. Hopefully it's near the top of your inbox. And it's also available on the committee materials webpage, which is hosted by OPLA. And you can get to when you're on the Maine Legislature's page by going to the IDEA committee and selecting committee materials link at the top right-hand side of the page. But I do have the bill analysis to share as well.
Yeah, if you want to throw it up there, that's
Yes. Okay.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So again, this bill analysis is on the original bill and not on the amendment, as this was created last session before the amendment was brought forward. I'm not even sure we actually considered the amendment at the time because of the carryover request.
Then could you increase the size?
Absolutely.
Of the analysis? Thank you.
So this bill establishes the Community Redevelopment Land Bank Authority to coordinate the acquisition of blighted, abandoned, and environmentally hazardous or functionally obsolete property for redevelopment, including property identified as historic, but not including real property owned by a federally recognized Indian tribe, unimproved land, or an active or former military facility. The bill establishes a fund to support the purpose of the authority, which includes a source of revenue as a fee on the disposal of construction and demolition debris. The bill also authorizes the creation of municipal redevelopment authorities to work with the Community Redevelopment Land Bank Authority for the purpose of transferring property and coordinating redevelopment. The Community Redevelopment Land Bank Authority is required to establish a development-ready community planning committee for the purposes of establishing statewide community redevelopment guidelines. So it does many different things. So it's essentially establishing three unique things: the redevelopment authority, the fund, and the development ready community planning committee. And then it's authorizing municipalities to also create their own community redevelopment land bank authorities. These were the original individuals who testified for. Nobody testified against at the time, and two people testified neither for nor against. And as I mentioned, Mr. Goldberg from MMA has submitted updated testimony in support of the bill. I'm not sure if you've seen the amendment, but my understanding was that he is aware of the amendment. I'm not sure if he's with us today. At the time, this was a relatively quick analysis. So if we move forward with the amendment, I do have additional things that I would like to present to the committee. But at the time, there was some confusion around the use of the word "and" instead of "or" when describing the type of properties. There may be some need for definitions of terms such as the word "blighted." And it was unclear who the authority would submit legislation to in section 5161 of the bill. There were some information requests during the public hearing, particularly around what type of properties would be exempted, especially related to federally owned land or property. I believe in particular, Representative Austin had a question about like a property like the post office in her town, if that would be able to be a part of this work. So when it refers specific to federally owned land or property, really this is talking about an active or former military facility that qualifies for inclusion in the Defense Environmental Restoration Program. And then of course, anything that is recognized as a federally recognized Indian tribe or land. So real property or land. And then historic properties are also included. So they can be included in this as well. And the historic restoration. So not just taking a historic property and replacing it, but doing historic preservation work could be part of the process as well. We had a number of individuals who testified who have experience doing this, in particular individuals from Michigan. And then also more close to home, the city of Sanford actually has a land bank authority, and they've done some work, and they gave testimony and had a presentation about how that works in Sanford. I think these were more relevant at the time to how it sort of intersected with other work that was going on. I think LD 446 died on the floor. And LD 1240 was carried over and has not been taken up again. So those were on people's minds at the time. 28 other states have similar programs. There are 200 land bank programs. And we, I guess I said, noted, we heard from Michigan. And then these were a couple of the amendments that people put forward in their testimony. And the sponsor, of course, has one. Nancy Smith from Grossmart, Maine, suggested moving forward with just the authorization for municipal authorities to create land banks, but to hold off on the other elements of the bill in order to do further exploration. Maine Equal Justice had 2 amendments to the Development Ready Community Planning Committee. And DECD had questioned whether or not some of the structures that are being created in the bill, if they could live within already established structures rather than creating new ones. And the bill does contain an element of eminent domain and the state's ability to take property through eminent domain for the land bank authority. So I've included that here, and I believe the sponsor has addressed that or will address that with you today if you bring her forward. And then the fiscal impact still not determined at this point, but just to note in terms of funding, the bill creates a new 9-member board that has the ability to hire an executive director and hire staff and employ counsel as necessary. So there's some funding elements there. It establishes a fund that they are thinking about the fee for disposal of construction and demolition debris. It's currently $2 a ton. They would increase it by adding $3 a ton to go to the community redevelopment land bank. That's the, and it would of course receive any state and federal funding. So it could receive federal funds as well, of which federal funds do exist for land bank programs. So I think that was the sponsor's intent in establishing the fund and the language around that. Okay, so that's where the bill stood at the end of last year.
Representative Andrews, I was going to have her bring up the amendment next. You have a question on the bill analysis right now, or do you want to say the amendment first?
Just a quick question under one of the issues was definitions. I think we need definitions not just for blighted, but for also abandoned, environmentally hazardous, and functionally obsolete. I'm not sure if that's addressed or not.
Okay, why don't we bring up the amendment and so everybody can see what the new version is. And then we can bring in the bill sponsor and see if she's got additional remarks before we dive into questions and considerations.
So I can speak to just some of the changes, but I think, again, the sponsor is probably better suited to share some of the work that went into this. I believe the sponsor had seen the bill analysis and tackled a couple of the notes that I had given, in particular, the blighted, the use of and or. One thing I would like to note is the unusual use of a findings and declaration of necessity section. This is essentially a purpose clause or a purpose section. These are unusual and not recommended. There are sort of three reasons why an individual may want to include that in their bill. And usually it's if they're anticipating some type of constitutional challenge. So this would help to clarify the intent. The other reason is that if you make major changes in existing laws, like restructuring laws, for example, or if it's a model uniform act, otherwise they have a tendency to obfuscate the meaning of the substantive provisions, which in my interpretation, I think that this is unnecessary and does just that, make it a little unclear what the purpose is, and a tendency to rely too heavily on the purpose and clause rather than on the substantive sections that follow. And that had a lot to do with the and brings up the question that Representative Andrews brought up, is using a lot of those terms over and over again without a clear definition. So that's one thing I would like to note just in regards to the section 5152. Of course, some of the language has been changed. So the idea here is or. You don't have to be all of these things. You could be blighted, abandoned, environmentally hazardous, or functionally obsolete. So not all, but just one in order to qualify. The idea here is to seek to repurpose. So that's a change. And I'd have to bring up, I'll note that I did not create the amendment. So it's not in a consistent form. There was more language here. I'm not sure what the phrase that was removed was in this case. I'd have to open the original bill, which I don't have open at the time. It does include historic buildings. I think this makes it more clear that historic buildings can be a part of this, and that it's not just to redevelop, but also to rehabilitate. So the addition of the word rehabilitation. And again, including that sentence about rehabilitation of historic properties throughout. There is an addition to ex officio members of the redevelopment authorities board, commissioner of transportation, and the director of the Maine Historic Preservation Commission or their designees. Otherwise, no other changes, just the addition of those two individuals. So the board itself is 9 members, and then it has 5 ex officio members who are non-voting, and those are all commissioners or appointed individuals by the state. The changing again of the words and or throughout here in historic buildings. Powers and duties. So they've added this statement here at the top. So that makes this here the powers and duties about the Community Redevelopment Land Bank Authority. Adds rehabilitation, and the portion about eminent domain has added the phrase to the extent necessary to fulfill the purposes of this subchapter. So it still allows for a municipality with a municipal redevelopment authority to exercise the power of eminent domain. And then significant changes to the development ready community planning committee. So this is so one of the big changes is that it's developing guidelines. So not establishing guidelines, but developing guidelines for communities who wish to use them. So not setting a standard that everybody has to go up to, but saying, here's what we think would work in terms of a guideline. And if communities would like those or would like to use those as a starting point, that they would exist.
Ms. Olson, what's the
Yes.
difference between the red and the blue that we're seeing here?
They represent, I believe, the red was the original changes that were submitted at the end of last session, and the blue represents work that was done in the interim and additional changes that were submitted at the beginning of this session.
Okay, thank you.
Yes. Adding, again, they've added some members to the Development Ready Community Planning Committee, Department of Transportation, also Department of Ag, member of the Maine Historic Preservation Committee. And then I believe this is based off of testimony that was submitted, also now includes a representative from an organization that advocates for the rights of low-income renters and homeowners, and a representative of a local or statewide organization promoting civil rights that has racial justice or racial equity as its primary mission.
Ms. Olson,
Yes.
Representative Andrews has his hand up.
Okay.
Did you want to chime in after she finishes going through, or do you have something specific on one of the line items?
I do have a specific question on one of the line items. I wasn't sure if we're doing this section by section. But my question was, going back to eminent domain, does that qualifier that was added change the meaning or intent of what is said at all? Or is it just kind of like a little addition?
I think my interpretation was it was more of a little addition. There is other language, and you'll have to forgive me off the top of my head. I can't remember where it is. I need a minute to look at it, not on the screen, so I don't make you all crazy. But going back and forth, the eminent domain, or it does say the land to be redeveloped needs, you only need to take as much in order to do the redevelopment or the rehabilitation. So for example, if it was abandoned property on 20 acres, but you're just going to address the abandoned property, so you only needed, let's say, an acre. My understanding of the interpretation is you couldn't use, well, you wouldn't take all 20 acres for that purpose, and I think that would include the eminent domain.
Who determines the feasibility of that? If they determined they needed 20 acres, couldn't they take 20 acres?
I think that that's I think that that's a question that's not answered in the legislation right now, is sort of who determines this, especially as it relates to eminent domain. We do have the eminent domain statute, so they would be guided by the language specifically in that. I included a link in the bill analysis to that statute, so we could pull that up as well. So they would at least be bound to the language in current legislation regarding eminent domain. But it appears it would either be the state level land bank authority or the municipal level land bank authority, depending on who was taking the original action.
And could the state level authority supersede the municipal or local?
My understanding is that the state one, let me scroll up. So
I guess, is there any kind of preemption for the state to be, the big dog and say this is how it's going to be when the municipality might not want it?
So my understanding is we're going to go up to the top. This is a little complicated. I'll admit, I think there needs to be clarity in the purpose of each. So you have the land bank authority, and they are a body corporate and politic, and an instrumentality of the state. Their purpose is to assist municipalities in the assembly and clearance of title to an acquisition of property identified as blighted, abandoned, environmentally hazardous, or functionally obsolete that has been documented, that has documented potential to be used, rehabilitated, or developed to promote economic growth within the state.
Quick question on that. So the authority could define what is blighted, abandoned, environmentally hazardous, or functionally obsolete, and then they could claim through eminent domain what would correspond to their definition.
As it's
be governing themselves.
Well, and so my reading of this is that I did go too far. Is that they're to assist. So it seems like the action must be taken on behalf of the municipality has to take the action first. And that the state agency is to, I guess, speed things up or to deal with issues that the municipality can't or isn't equipped to handle in terms of title and acquisition, for example. but that the decision has to come from the municipality. That being said, I think your point about clearly defining blighted, abandoned, environmentally hazardous, I think there's a lot open to that. And we have the community ready. Sorry, I am struggling with all the different titles. The community ready, the development ready community planning committee, they can establish guidelines. I think my interpretation is they're the ones who would be essentially defining those terms. So a recommendation is if the committee doesn't want to leave those terms sort of open to interpretation, perhaps defining them more clearly or saying who should define them. There is no rulemaking really included here either. So I think that's a question for the committee to consider.
Thanks for that. Sorry to sidetrack you so much, but I think it's
No, that's
important.
okay. This is a complicated bill, and we're also trying to remember where everything stood. So hopefully I explained that okay.
You did. Thank you.
Okay. Should I keep going? Okay.
Yep, where are we left?
Where was I? We're almost through. We do a community development guidelines here. So they'll develop the community guidelines intended to support the goals. And again, they've added the need for households of all income levels, housing needs to the guidelines. So that's the addition there. So really, this is the group that's coming up with the guidelines. And my interpretation of that would also be definitions. But the change to developing the guidelines to use at the request means that they're not the sole authority on that. So there's wiggle room with the municipal authorities as well. And I think the only other change is the date on the change of the fees, because of course we had carried it over. So, and then change it from 2022 to 2023. Okay, I think, and then just, this is the summary, which is not substantive, but is addressing the changes in the bill. Again, I didn't write this amendment. I would need a little more time with it as well.
I believe we have the bill sponsor here. Senator, I can't see everybody.
I'm gonna stop sharing so that will be easier.
There we go. Okay. So Representative Sachs is here. I'm going to see if she has anything to add and any questions from the committee, and then we'll go on from there. Good morning, Representative Sachs.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you for being here today and working with LD 1694. It feels like a long time since May, since we were last all together. So I appreciate that so much. So a couple of questions. I can tell Representative Andrews that you, like I, served on your local municipal town council. And so having this sense of making sure that municipalities have what they need is really, really important. I will say that there are definitions that are available in Maine statute, for example, and I was just pulling them up as we were coming through, that, for example, that there's a Maine definition of blighted, which Ms. Olson is correct, is we didn't put in there, but certainly can be put in there so that people are able to see what it is that we're talking about. But that's I'm trying to find the statute that I just had in front of me. But there's I believe it's MRSA Title 30. But these are all, MRS Title 30A 5202, for example, is the definition of blighted. And so that's what we were working off of. It's not in this bill, happy to put it in the bill. There's standard legal definitions of functionally obsolete that we used as well. So those were the definitions that we were doing, which from what was in statute already, just hadn't put them in there. We had done some descriptive work in the beginning, just so people understood what the bill was trying to do. And I hope that much of that has been accomplished. And again, happy to work with the committee to make some technical changes around that. I do want to stress, though, that the part that Ms. Olson had talked about of that municipalities have to enter into an intergovernmental agreement with the state land bank. There is no this sense that they could just decide to take a partial in New Sharon, Maine, which is where I grew up, or here in Freeport or in Paris or anywhere else. That's not what this is about. This is an intergovernmental agreement that they're making with the municipality. Municipality is saying we have this parcel that we can't develop. These are these intractable properties. And I've spoken with a lot of you who said, I can point out the ones in my community that are not able to be developed by private means, that the municipality just can't take on because of the cost or the capacity that they have. And so this is the grassroots solution that they have we have come up with after 2 years of study. So I really wanted to make that clear after working with the administration and saying, having their, Jerry Reed was their legal counsel, took a look at it. There was a small tweak to that section simply to be able to really hammer down that it's only in the purpose of this intergovernmental agreement. So Representative Andrews, I'm right there with you. I don't want anybody coming in and saying, you need to take this. No, this is based on what the municipality wants. So those are some broader questions that I think we were tackling this morning, but I'm happy to answer other specific questions that you might have.
Thank you, Representative Sachs. Any specific questions for the bill sponsor? Representative Collmore.
Thank you, Representative Roberts. Hi, Representative Sachs. Thanks so much for being here and for putting so much work into this bill. I do have a couple of questions. My first question is, who pays the tonnage fee?
Great question. So Representative Collmore, also a member of your town council for a long time. I think there's a lot of us on here today. So this is the tipping fee that already exists. So administratively, there's very little change for folks who are already doing this, there's already a $2 fee. The additional $3 fee that has been supported by absolutely everybody, as you saw those list of 50 or so supporters, including developers. It's those who are doing the tipping fee for the construction debris and waste. So it's those who are already bringing that construction debris waste. And if you remember, you saw on the sponsor list, on the supporter list, the Developers Collaborative, Marita is on board, DEP was the one who helped us out with this, because we really thought that it made sense to do it for what was directly the use that was directly being affected, right? So if you're bringing more construction and debris, then that money is going right back into redevelopment. So that's why we use that.
Okay, thank you. And then with the eminent domain part of this, how does this conflict or maybe work with the municipality's requirement to, for example, for abandoned property that's been tax acquired by the town? We have requirements to put these properties up for bid, and does this mean the town doesn't have to do this, or this is after the bids have been unsuccessful?
Right, and so that really is going to be up to your protocols, right, for tax acquired properties. Here in Freeport, we haven't had so many of these intractable properties that cannot be, there is no developing. And so it really is going to depend, the eminent domain piece, I'm not sure how that played into your question, Representative Collmore, but municipalities still have their same powers that they have regarding eminent domain. This doesn't change any of that. And we closely mirrored the statute on eminent domain, like Ms. Olson said. We're not expanding any rights whatsoever for this.
Representative Geiger.
Thank you. I also want to thank you, Representative Sachs, for all the work you've done on this bill. As a 6-year member of City Council in the city of Rockland, we dealt with this frequently. We had many blighted and abandoned buildings. We spent much time trying to find title, work through who actually owned it, figure out which bank had now foreclosed on it and was holding on to it and refused to let it go. It was an incredible lesson in frustration. So I love the idea of a land bank that actually can cut through what a small town found impossible to do. The question I have for you is, it's my understanding that without a statewide land bank, and I might be wrong about this, the state of Maine does not have access to a lot of federal funding for just this purpose. Is that correct? That there is a lot of funding, but you have to have a land bank in order to access it?
Great question, Representative Geiger. Thank you so much. Yes, that mere 60 million that we talked about back in May, it is now up to $5 billion. The federal government is very invested in this type of structure. And while there may be sort of land bank-esque type of things that Ms. Olson talked about, there's only 18 statewide land banks, right? So we would be number 19. And so when you do the math around $5 billion of what we could access, think about that in terms of an investment here in Maine for these, again, intractable properties that have no place else, no other way to be developed. And we cannot do so without having the structure of a land bank. You're absolutely right.
Thank you.
Senator Curry.
Thank you, Chair Roberts. Thank you, Representative Sachs. I really appreciate this bill. And my question to you is, I'm always looking at unintended consequences, and I wanted to, when we talk about eminent domain, we want to make sure that it's not, someone's property and they're like, yeah, it's not abandoned. It's not, it's not obsolete. It's not, this is my property, and you just have a different standard. And so that we have, and that no one's losing property, and being abused, that it's being abused. So can you talk about the safeguards, or talk about what you've done to make sure that we're not increasing increasing any risk to property owners, solving this problem narrowly without creating any other problems?
Right. Thank you so much, Senator. And I heard that loud and clear from the committee back when we talked about this in May. And that's why having that carryover period to have the administration's legal review, their lead counsel take a look, was really important. And it looks like a small tweak in blue. And thank you, Representative Bernard, for saying what was the red and what was the blue. The red was many of the changes that you all had suggested, or sponsors had suggested, or outside folks back in May. And then the blue really was the small tweaks we made with working with the Mills administration, the different department agencies. And one of the most important parts was that legal review for eminent domain. And the fact that, again, municipal powers are still the same. And I think Ms. Olson put in the statute for eminent domain into the chat. We're following those same guidelines, and putting it in the small tweak we did at the suggestion of the administration to put in for the purposes of this subchapter, right? It is just for those municipally identified parcels that they would like redeveloped, is really important to make sure that it's narrow in that way. So I appreciate that. And we've done every due diligence that we can think of, and working with, as you can see by the stakeholder group who are here to also answer your questions, they feel very strongly that municipal rights still are paramount, and that this is only for those intractable properties that we can't possibly do any other way.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Representative Ducharme.
Good morning, Representative Sachs.
Good morning,
Thank you,
Representative Ducharme.
Chair Roberts. I struggle with this because I appreciate the principle that your bill addresses, having, like many of us, served on boards of selectmen and struggled with blighted and environmentally hazardous properties and so forth over the years, as well as one of the current things that are happening in these kinds of properties is the inability to find out who really owns it, with mortgage-backed securities and banks buying loans from this bank and then reselling it to this bank. Currently working in the real estate business, titles are a mess, and it's sometimes very difficult to figure out who owns it. So I think that there is a place for some sort of a mechanism to help municipalities with this particular process. I do appreciate, you and I had discussions about this, and one of our big points in the discussion was to recognize that if you want to have something killed by public outcry, you will do something that damages home rule in the state of Maine. I think home rule is one of those things that Mainers just are absolutely adamant about. And so I appreciate the work that you've done on that. My question, I have several questions, but first and foremost, I don't understand why we've decided to include historic and historic preservation and all the rest of that into this bill. They already have their own kind of framework to deal with that. And in including them in this bill, I think that the process by which these properties are going to be rehabilitated or whatever needs to be done to them, the adding that piece in is going to really just explode the cost to rehabilitate these things, because anything when you add a historic designation to it has certain rules that you have to follow in order to do any kind of rehabilitation. And so that in and of itself, in large part, is the reason why some of these properties are sitting there not doing anything, because somebody has declared it a historic building. And so now nobody can touch it unless you use, a special teak wood from the hinterlands of Azerbaijan or something like that. And nobody can afford it. So by including the historic piece in here, I think it's one of those things I'm going to struggle with it, because there's already a group, there's already a commission, the Historic Preservation Commission, to do that. So can you speak to that a little bit? And then depending on time, I may ask you a couple other questions.
Right. Thank you so much. That is such a great point. And I know there's some folks in the room, Jim Tischler, Kara, who's from the Land Bank in Michigan, and Kara Tischer from Build Maine. They in particular were really excited about exactly what you said, Representative Ducharme, is not precluding historic buildings from being able to be redeveloped through a land bank. And that's really what it is, because it's exactly what you said. Some of the reason for the intractability, why private developers or municipal tax acquired cannot take these on, is because there's a historic designation. A land bank can, and can leverage those funds that municipalities simply can't. So that's the reason to do it. You're talking about a historic designation, I think is the term that you're looking for. And that's exactly why. And this program would have those resources that others can't. And I also just want to point out, I was talking with Senator Pouliot, who's one of the co-sponsors of this bill in the Senate, and he was talking about, as a realtor as well, exactly what this is about. Every community has one of these properties, whether it's got a historic preservation designation, environmentally compromised, whatever it happens to be. And that is why these municipalities just can't do it. That's exactly why it's there. So thank you for highlighting that, Representative Ducharme. That's exactly it.
But don't you, if I can follow up for a second, don't you run the risk of every single property being looked at through the prism of historic preservation? And in doing so, I think it is going to create a framework that's just going to be difficult to manage.
Right. That has not been the experience of the land banks that my understanding that I have done the research with, but you certainly don't want to preclude them. I don't think every building, there's a whole process, as you referenced, for making historic designation, like you said, that needs the teak wood from the slow growth forest up in Aroostook County, for example. That's an entirely huge process that they would have to get through. And like I said, Jim Tischler, Jim Tischler and Kara Wilbert can speak to this a little more, but historic preservation, it's a designation. It's not a regular status, if that makes any sense. So most of these properties are not going to have that.
So the idea is not to exclude them, but not to make them the focus.
Correct. It's every, as you just said, and many of us said, every community is different.
And I
single
think that's something that needs to be clear, because I think that I don't know how many people came before the Board of Selectmen that wanted to do X, Y, and Z with this building, And part of their funding stream was going to be the historic tax credits. And when you say, well, you first have to spend the money and then you get the tax credit, then all of a sudden they just fade off into the woodwork because they don't have any money. They think they're just going to get a check from this magical historic preservation commission. And that's not the case. And I fear that you run into the same thing with this kind of thing. So I think it has to be clear in the bill.
Right. And I understand that, having been on tax committee and we just did we're reviewing the historic seed preservation tax credit last year and again this year. And it is a very thorough process. It is not the default at all. It is not the default status. It's a very distinct process and approval. And clearly one that you, being in realty, have come up across, but it's a very convoluted one. And like you said, if a private developer, example, I was talking with Senator Pouliot, and he has used those, but those are for properties that can be developed under that with private development. The ones we're talking about cannot, absolutely not.
Representative Hepworth, do you have a question for the sponsor, or is this discussion?
I have a question for the sponsor and a hope for something later. And I just want to say again, Representative Sachs, that I appreciate the effort that has gone into this bill. It's always good when sponsors are willing to really work a bill and bring stakeholders together. So my question to you is about transportation and pulling the Commissioner of Transportation as one of the ex officio members. So I'd like to hear a little bit more about that. And then I'm hoping that somebody from MMA is here today to talk to us about their thoughts on this new version for this.
Yeah, thank you so much, Representative Hepworth. And we haven't really talked about the development ready planning community at all. But as we talked about in May, I'll refresh your memory, is that really all of this is about smart growth and redevelopment. Smart Growth America actually was one of the architects of land banks, and trying to help municipalities, not from a top-down edict of the state of Maine. This is really the grassroots solution of saying, what are best practices for you? So many municipalities do not have the capacity right now, whether they don't have a planner, if they don't have code enforcement. I know my dad was a code enforcer for 14 and a half years, just retired at 73. Sorry, Dad, just told your age. That this capacity has been diminished. And so these guidelines are really to help people start thinking about smart growth principles and have a checklist, so that when they in their communities are talking about what do we want our town center to look like. I'm thinking of Waterville in particular, who's done a really good job with this, is what do we want this to look like? And so having a starting point of being able to say things like accessible transportation, things that are close by, affordable housing, green spaces, how are you able to do that? This is for folks who can utilize the land bank process, but also have this outside of it. And many other states, and I think we talked about this in May, many other states are utilizing, it's almost a foundational piece of starting to think even about those abandoned, blighted, environmentally compromised properties. How are they going to be redeveloped? And having some sort of framework, voluntary guidelines to be able to do that. And having all of those players together. And that's why the Development Ready Community Planning Committee is there, is to help have all of these together and not silos, because we really need to think about integrated planning at this point for the municipalities, and how can we best have the tools to help them do that.
Representative Bernard. This for the sponsor?
Yeah, is it okay that I ask a question to the sponsor?
Yeah, no, I'm just making sure we don't move into discussion while we still have the sponsor here, so that we're delineating between the two.
Got you. Good morning, Representative Sachs, and thanks very much for being here. In the interest of full disclosure, I need to tell everyone, you can see it in writing, but I'm a co-sponsor of this bill. May I go forward with my question?
Yes.
Okay. Because I thought that I understood everything about the bill until I received a question this morning, Representative Sachs, from a person who was asking, let me get this correct, about environmentally hazardous lands. not necessarily buildings, but lands. And so the question had to do with the environment. And so I'm wondering, tell me more. I should know this, but I do not know this, about what this bill has to say regarding environmentally hazardous lands and how they could be maybe reclaimed or taken by this new entity.
Yeah, absolutely. And a great question, because we didn't really talk about that in May at all, Representative Bernard. And thank you for being a co-sponsor. I know the municipal folks up in Caribou are one of the drivers of this bill because they see the potential for their community as well. So thank you so much. DEP regulations are subject to DEP always. And again, if a municipality has a tax acquired property that is environmentally compromised, again, we're going back. I keep going back to that home rule. I'm seeing you, Representative Ducharme and Representative Andrews. When you're going back to home rule, this is about a property that has been tax acquired. We had one here in Freeport that had a structure on it. Not sure I'd call it a house, but the bulk of the property was environmentally compromised. Now, we were able to use brownfield funds, which is, again, much of the community revitalization funds that are coming through the infrastructure bill. Some of them are specifically for environmental cleanup, which many of these properties will have. Let's be honest. But the one we had in Freeport was almost all environmentally compromised land with a sort of structure on it that we were able to leverage funds to do. Some municipalities just can't do that. And so these would be able to be utilized. But it's really about, I go back to this, the municipality and these properties that cannot be repurposed in any other way without some help, for sure. And I know this is really to support the municipalities. Sometimes it's better for a state entity to be able to assume control of that property if that's what the municipality wants.
Okay, and just to follow up regarding what would be named a hazardous piece of land, I guess that would never, you're telling me, is that correct? That would never come from the land bank, that would come specifically from the municipality to say, this is a hazardous piece of land. I don't even know what the definition is of that. Is that in the bill itself, the definition?
Like Ms. Olson said, we didn't define them in the bill. Happy to do so. The state of Maine has a definition for environmentally compromised that is blowing up in my email right now. I'm happy to send it to the committee afterwards. But all of these were based on Maine definitions of environmentally compromised, blighted, and I think that's a great point. Happy to have those defined right in statute, many bills too.
Great. I think that would be really helpful to us just because it's easier to evaluate.
Sure, absolutely.
What we're going to be doing, how these will be looked at, and we can evaluate more clearly what is it that we're giving our approval to. And so
sure.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, absolutely. I completely agree. And again, municipalities, we in Freeport and all of my friends here who have done this on town councils, we had to go by state regulations as well in terms of what we defined as environmentally compromised, blighted, et cetera. So absolutely happy to have them in there. Great question. Thank you.
Senator Pearway.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just as far as P, and I don't know if this has to do with the PFAS problem somewhat on using that hazardous land. And I'm just kind of, is there examples of how this use has worked, and what has it been directed towards when they do these type projects? I guess I'd like to see some examples of other states of what they've done with this, because it seems like this federal money's grown, and I just don't want to see it just abused and just keep building and building just because the money's there. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
Senator, I believe Ms. Olson had some examples, correct?
Yes.
In her bill analysis. So
I did. Also, we had a presentation from Sanford on projects that they've done with their current, our Sanford, Maine current. And we also received a presentation, which I believe included materials from Michigan's land bank. And that's in the testimony. I'm happy to go pull those and send them in the chat or separately in an email as well to refresh everyone's memory,
Yeah,
either
thank you.
now or later.
And there's several folks in the waiting room as well, if you want to hear from them, if the chairs would like them to be brought in now, they're happy to testify today.
I just, I don't know, if, you know, what the plans are for like farms that, you know, have hardships because of the PFAS problem. But yet, and it gets, and I don't know if it gets to the point of an eminent domain, but that's, I'm just kind of wondering how this all works to the expenditures and whatever to use on those lands.
Right. Again, though, if a farmer is on their land and they want to stay on their land, this is
Yeah.
not a conversation we're having, right? Around a land bank. This is not about taking a farmer's land. This is about if that property, for whatever reason, became tax acquired by the municipality and they did not have the capacity to remedy it in any way, that's when they would have a conversation with the state land bank if they wanted to, for sure. So I think that's a really good point, is this is not about, it's about how can we leverage resources that are available to us, but use them wisely and in different ways. So I think you're absolutely right, Senator.
Thank you.
And Senator Sarah, if you'd like, if there's someone in our attendee list that's from another state where they have this and no one else has any more questions for the bill sponsor, I can move her out and we can move someone else in. Okay. Representative Deschamps.
Thank you. One of the questions that I have, and I, like I said, I had multiple, but I'm going to bring this one up. The committee sizes, both in terms of the members of the authority as well as this development committee, and the folks that are on it, I understand, like the committee is really, the authority is 9 members with those ex officio members. And then this development ready community planning committee is, in as near as I can see, it's a minimum of 17 or 18 members. I wonder why we, you know, there are some of the folks on here, transportation and Department of Agriculture, but I think that those committees, that committee size in and of itself is probably almost unworkable, at least to get a meeting together. The other thing that I've heard, and I would like you to speak to, is how do we avoid a situation where we have these things that go through the land bank and they get funneled down to favored this person or that person based on who's on the committee. You know, I don't want to cut out local investment in my town because we're going to go through this land bank business, and you know, we already struggle with contractors coming in from, you know, Portland and South Portland and so forth and so on, while our own local guys are sitting here going, hey, I could have done that, you know. And I don't want to get in that space with this kind of a bill. So can you speak to that, please?
You bet. Thank you, Representative Deschamps. First, let's talk about the size of the committees. That's what you'd ask first. The Land Bank, Redevelopment Land Bank Authority is modeled very much on Maine Housing Authority, Maine Turnpike Authority. Very common for that number of directors to be there. So we're just following a template that has worked very well for Maine. The Development Ready Planning Community, it was felt that it was important for this community to come together because of the conversations, and they're having these same conversations now within the Housing Commission that they're talking about, within Smart Growth America, within actually the Brookings Institute just had a really good report. I'm happy to send you more to read around the interdisciplinary, the necessity to have that, to break down those silos and to have that interdisciplinary work done come together when you're developing the guidelines, when you're saying what is important for communities to be able to think about for smart growth and for economic development. And so that's why, because if you're going to do a policy, if you're going to put together statewide guidelines, you really need to make sure that this is going to be all together. Will this continue on in the same way? I don't know that. It may disperse after they've come up with some guidelines, but they also may just do periodic reviews of it, making sure that every single consideration is on the table for statewide guidelines of smart growth and good economic development. So that's why the two committees are formulated the way they are. I would say on your second point, again, I'm going to go back to these are intergovernmental agreements. So if somebody in Madison, if the select board in Madison is saying, this is a parcel that we cannot develop, but we would like to have an intergovernmental agreement. And you know the nature of those. They can be based on what you in the land bank, you town of Madison and the state land bank would like it to be. I'm not sure, and we can ask Jim Tischler if they do things like contract agreements about who's the labor involved in the development. I didn't go down to that granular level, but we can certainly, I encourage you to have Jim Tischler or Ian Housel if he's in the House talking about how that specifically have worked with land banks. But again, this is based on what that community wants. And I feel very strongly about that, as I know you do.
That's that, Representative Sharp. Okay. I don't see any more questions for the bill sponsor. So thank you, Representative Sachs.
Thank you all so much for your excellent questions.
Continue on.
All right. Thanks a lot, everybody.
Okay. Okay. Oh, Senator Curry, did you have a question before we?
No, was there a request? Thank you, Representative Chair Roberts. Was there were we bringing on, requesting guests, or is there someone lined up to be next to be brought in?
I was going to have Ms. Reed move Representative Sachs out so we don't have too many people in at the same time, and then we can bring someone in.
Great. I was just going to, I'd love to hear a follow-up from Mr. Tischler regarding both how they use the land banks for, as it relates to historic properties preservation, and as it relates to this last question is the nature of the relationship between the town and those intergovernment agreements. So if there was to more fully describe how it works in, I think, Michigan, is that correct?
Yeah, Tischler. Okay.
I guess I'll have to ask that same thing once he arrives. So
I
one second.
am promoting him right now. In theory. In that limbo moment.
Welcome, Mr. Tischler.
Good morning,
Good
everybody.
morning. How are you?
Good.
Thank you.
We have
Thank
some
you.
questions for you from the committee.
Sure, of course.
Old habits die hard, Senator, huh? Go ahead
Thank
and
you,
go
Chair
first.
Roberts. So, and thank you, Mr. Tischler, for joining us today. We had, as I think you probably heard, we had a couple questions regarding how this works, why to not exclude historic preservation projects, and how that works in your state. And then also, can you describe the safeguards for home rule in the nature of the intergovernment agreements between the municipal authority and your state authority?
Yeah, thanks. I appreciate the opportunity to answer those questions. I'm going to start with the second question first, if I can, because it's going to, I think, set stage for you. Our system is a little different than what is in your bill, but the structure would be similar, meaning that there's a state entity, a state land bank. I guess I should step back. I serve as the development director for the State Land Bank Authority here in Michigan, and I'm talking to you all from Lansing, the state capital, today. So in our system, our structure, back 17 years ago, the legislature signed into law creating state land bank, and then local counties in Michigan, a little different than what you have, but counties have the ability to create local land banks at county level. And what happens there is that when a local county decides to create a land bank by a majority vote of the governing body, then they send notice to the state land bank, and we execute an intergovernmental agreement with them, which immediately confers all the powers of land banking down to the local level, that they can actually practice that land banking. And then the reason I shared it with you is because the relationship changes then to becoming very cooperative between the state and the locals. Now, what happens is that when a local land bank comes into creation, the state's approach through its intergovernmental agreement and its practice is to become subservient, to provide tactical and technical support for all matters at that local land bank level. So you can see in policy and structure here that when a local entity creates a land bank, the state's obligation and interest in our mission is to provide service support for the decision process always made and always run at the local level. There's one caveat to that, and that's on properties, for example, large contaminated parcels or functionally obsolete or other properties which are beyond the capacity of the local land bank to be able to address. And in those situations, they make requests for involvement to the state land bank, and we come in to provide operational support with them for those types of properties. So that's why I want you all to understand that that's the relationship here between the state entity and the local entities. It's highly cooperative, it's mutually beneficial, and it scales to the size or the type of the property or the issue that that local jurisdiction is affecting. Okay. So let me move to historic properties now. Similar to Maine, Michigan has very robust historic preservation laws in place, both to enable properties to be designated for federal status, but also local historic districts and local properties as well. What's important to understand, at least, is that it requires a designation process to be done at the local community level. So when there's an interest of an owner or interest in a local unit of government here to want to designate a property or a district or a couple of properties, whatever it may be, that there's a formal process here where a notice is provided, hearings, discussions, and that happens here. I suspect there's a similar process in Maine for local property or district designations. And so the relationship between historic properties and land banks is that if the land bank here were to obtain control of a property which might be blighted, obsolete, derelict, but also might have some historic value, well, the way that it would be treated from a historic perspective is that the land bank or the local unit of government working with its land bank with a private owner, perhaps because investments would need to be made for private investment made in order to leverage benefits, that a designation process would have to get started. So it's not an automatic assumption that a potentially historic property owned by a land bank goes down the route. It really has to go through a formal process. And if so desired by that land bank and by that local municipality, that would happen, but it doesn't happen carte blanche or automatically. And as I heard a conversation of the committee here going before, I could assume that Maine having similar local or statute to govern how historic properties go through a designation process in Maine, I would suspect that you've got a similar situation, that if there was desire at local level, then a designation effort would take place, but outside of that, there would be two separate tracks, land banking and historic preservation.
You're on mute, Senator.
Thank you. Chair Roberts, to follow up, please.
Yes.
Thank you. As it relates to land banking for at the municipal or the state level, they can accept properties that are already designated as historic, correct? And then so there's no limitation to taking abandoned properties that also have a historic designation, and then they could work towards those redevelopment efforts within the historic guidelines, correct?
Yeah, yes, they could here, and I suspect if you had that structure in Maine, you as well, yes. Mm-hmm.
Great. Thank you very much.
Sure.
Does the committee have any questions for Mr. Tischler? Seeing none, thank you for joining us today, Mr. Tischler.
Enjoy your day.
We could move him back over to the attendees list. And I'd like to ask the committee if there is anyone else they would like to hear from in the attendee list. Okay. Oh, Representative Pepworth.
Thank you, Ms. Chair. I wonder if anyone from MMA is here.
If there is someone from MMA, please raise your hand. Okay, it looks like we have, I'm gonna scroll through the,
Mr. Goldberg is in the attendee list.
perfect. Ms. Reed, can you move Mr. Goldberg over, please?
He's in limbo right now.
Yeah. Mr. Goldberg, thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
We'll dive right into questions. How's that?
Absolutely.
Representative Pepworth.
And I have a bit of a general one. I think many of us have the concern of local control and really wanting our local municipalities to be comfortable with a bill such as this. And so I am curious what your thoughts are on this amended bill.
Absolutely. This is a bill that actually, I would say, received a lot of attention from our municipal officials. At first, there was some skepticism, but as more information came out, thanks to this bill sponsor and some other devoted individuals, it came to a realization that when this power is used over municipal property, it's in an extreme situation, and that eminent domain is really going to be enforced only in the circumstances in which we want. And by that, I mean, we're talking about land that has no other option for it. Municipalities have explored numerous ways to have it developed locally through state partners, and there's no recourse for it. And so in comes, yes, an opportunity to supersede local control, but only when, again, there is no other option. And so for that, municipal officials are generally supportive of this. You know, on a local or regional level, there is certainly going to be a lot of municipal input and agency. And when the state land bank authority asserts its power, that's only because it's on a project that is well out of our capacity or scope. And so we're more than welcome to have that state partner. So from a holistic side, to answer your question, we are comfortable with how this interferes, I would say, with local authority.
That's great. Thank you very much.
Representative Ducharme.
Just real quickly, with respect to the question about eminent domain, because I know many of us have that, are you suggesting that the eminent domain authority will continue to lie with the local municipality and not necessarily with the commission?
So my understanding is that there essentially needs to be an invite in some regards, an informal, hey, we're having trouble with this property, and that the land bank authorities, whether they be regional or state, do have some powers that they could exercise, but only when kind of given permission to do it. It's more of a legal loophole that we're creating to speed up the redevelopment of this property. That's how we've interpreted it.
Okay, thank you.
Representative Andrews.
Thank you. I must have missed it. Who is Mr. Goldberg's organization?
With MMA. Did you have a question, Representative Andrews?
Just need a clarification. Thanks.
Okay, perfect. Looking to the committee for any other questions for Mr. Goldberg. Seeing none. Thank you for joining us this morning.
Thank you.
Ms. Reed, if you could move him back to the attendees. And again, back to the committee if there's anyone in the attendee list that you may like to hear from. Okay. Representative Geiger.
Yes, I'm wondering if Ian Househeel from Sanford is there. They have a land bank. I wonder if we could get his perspective.
Ms. Reed, if you
on
can,
whether this adds to his adds to the benefits or not.
There we go. Good morning, Mr. Househeel. How are you? Yep, I think you're on mute.
Good morning.
There we go. Perfect. Thank you for joining us. Representative Geiger.
Thank you. I'm just wondering if you can talk a little bit about how you see this bill playing with the land bank that you already have in Sanford. Does it, do you see it as allowing you to be much more effective, able to access more resources, or a possible conflict?
I don't see this as interfering at all. This is going to supplement what we do here locally. My involvement with this bill was really that it's much needed in the state. I work for the city of Sanford, and we've been very successful with our land bank. We've been able to turn properties that are vacant, abandoned, address title issues, address historic issues as well. And this is an opportunity for other municipalities to take advantage of that. This is something that I think will also address this coordination issue that we're talking with the state. This allows for that extreme situation when there is no path forward for a property and there is no path forward for a municipality as well. So I think, the potential to be able to access federal funds just sits at the absolute top of the list for me as this. I've worked in other programs such as clean water, and being able to access federal funds is just paramount to why we want this bill.
Thank you so much.
Does the committee have any questions for Mr. Houseo? Senator Seaway.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I was just wondering, how do you coordinate how the town feels about the use of that property once you take it for land use?
We use the law. It's under Title 17, 2,886 is the dangerous building law, and that allows the municipality to, in some cases, as necessary, demolish or secure a property. Through that process, we are able to remove a blight, say in a neighborhood, or be able to take a property that has no future, meaning it has no owner. It's encumbered by multiple mortgage holdings, as was mentioned by Representative Ducharme. Those mortgage holdings have been moved all across the country, all across the world in sub pieces. So the way that we're functioning is actually last resort in being able to take that property and return it back into a functional use in the community. So it's actually been very much a way to bring the community together in that property is finding new life and new vitality, where otherwise it continues to act as a blight, drain from neighborhoods, drain from the tax rolls, and take that property and give it a new future. So it's been very successful in that way.
So, determine the use for it.
Could you repeat that? I missed that.
How could you determine the use for that property?
We evaluate it. When the question, the first question is whether it's a blight. So oftentimes these are very apparent, right? First of all, it's going to have a hole in the roof. That's absolutely apparent. There's large sections of the building missing. You couldn't possibly see a use for it. So really there's two programs that, that go in different directions for us. One is, the path of housing. These are typically, urban type lots that will then be used for housing in the future. When they, in urbanized areas, they typically have water and sewer stub outs. And we're able to resell the lot for a future use as housing. So that's partly what happens. And then the other path is these large industrial type structures that don't have a path that way. And then those are returned to a state oftentimes of just level ground. So you're able then to do the remediation that's necessary, and then also move those back towards a path of reuse in the future.
Thank you.
Representative Ducharme.
Thank you, Chair Roberts. I'm inquiring as to in Sanford, what's kind of the ratio of say commercialized type properties versus residential that you have seen historically in your program?
So I've had to deal with specifically at this point 3 industrial size, and I've been responsible in my work with the land bank demolition of over 35 residential structures. And so I've been working for Sanford for 5 years. The program's been operational by that amount. So I'd say 97%. The industrial buildings are far more time consuming. They're very specialized. You know, I have a variety of backgrounds, and some of that dealing with hazardous facilities. So it's very much it's mostly residential. Put it that way.
Okay, thank you. I just wondered.
Representative Bernard.
Thanks so much, Chair Roberts. My question, thank you for the last question, because that leads me to this one, and that is, when you're dealing with that many residential properties, what typically or in the majority tends to happen with those properties after they are taken care of by the land bank?
We're trying to do more and more of this. A lot of them, I'll say that one of the first one, well, actually, I'll say many of them are bought, for example, by Habitat for Humanity, and they're building new housing on them. It's really impressive to see that they're buying these lots and putting up affordable housing, Habitat for Humanity affordable housing. Other ones are bought by private developers, and they're also building housing. So you know, to be able to take a property and a building that is really a blight and be able to build something new on it, and then in a few cases we have also been able to rehabilitate a building, but that occurs less. The unfortunate part with some of these is some of these buildings have been sitting since the savings and loan crisis back in 2007 and 2008. So they've been sitting that long, really just taking away from the neighborhood. But being able to take that property and turn it into new housing really benefits those communities in which they're located in.
Does that mean more single homes, or you would mention Habitat for Humanity? What else might be the most typical reuse?
For the residential properties, we have been using, those have been primarily single families, and sometimes 2 units. But there are some other properties in the works where we've considered a larger unit size based on what the private investment is interested in supporting, according to zoning.
Representative Andrews.
Thank you, Madam Chair. There seems a great likelihood that single-family zoning could be eliminated this session. Do you see that impacting the type of housing units that could potentially be built through land banks in the state of Maine?
No, I don't in this case, because Sanford has, we call it the urban zone here. Our zone is supportive of what this particular zone that encompasses much of our downtown and urbanized area is based on what the property will support. So if the lot will support multi-unit, you're going to be limited by those site factors and what the property will support in those cases. So judging on what's been rebuilt so far, I don't think I would expect to see changes. I think economics will drive that more.
Is that specifically to Sanford, or is that the whole state? Just for clarification.
I couldn't clarify for the state. I can only speak to Sanford. Thank you.
Okay, thanks.
Any further questions for Mr. House? No? Okay. All right, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for your time.
Appreciate your time. Representative Geiger.
My understanding is that George O'Keefe from Rumford is also in the speakers gallery and could be brought forward, and he does have statewide experience and may be able to answer Representative Andrews' questions and more just generally about how this might work around the state.
He's being brought in. Good morning, Mr. O'Keefe. How are you?
Good morning. Very well, thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you for joining us. Last question. Representative Andrews, did you want to circle back to your question with Mr. O'Keefe?
Yeah, I'm just curious as to what the abolition of single-family zoning would do in coordination with land banks for the type of housing that's built on properties that are acquired through the processes in the bill.
I think that's an important question. I heard your assessment in your sort of first question that you think is likely to go through. I think the home rule implications are, substantial, and I'm not necessarily confident at all that that's something that municipalities are necessarily going to support. The question of whether or not that's the right way to do development and whether or not eliminating single family zoning is the right thing to do or not is a broader policy question that has equity implications in certain places. But I mean, I don't take it as for granted that it would necessarily pass or go through. That being said, in some areas, yes, I think it would be beneficial in situations where if you don't have single family zoning anymore, you have the ability to build slightly higher density of housing. But again, like you still come into questions about home rule. Municipalities are still going to want to have their say on something, as they should under the structure of the state constitution, and which the stakeholders in this group will recall. In the group that we worked with, Representative Sachs, I was a very strong advocate for the consent provision in this bill, which requires the state land bank to work in concert with the municipality. And I told them clearly from the beginning, it's critical. You have to have consent of a municipality to get involved. And my take on it was, if you don't, this bill was not going to go forward. So I think the question that you're asking is partly about single family zoning, but also partly about home rule. And I think this bill does a very good job of respecting that.
Are there any other questions for Mr. O'Keefe from the committee? Seeing none. Oh, wait. Representative Geiger.
Thank you, Chair Roberts. Mr. O'Keefe, is there anything that you've heard in this conversation you'd like to throw your 2 cents into, given your experience?
Yep, I really appreciate that question, Representative Geiger, and I did want to answer a couple things. Representative Ducharme had mentioned concerns about historic preservation. If you don't have a local historic preservation ordinance, then there are not requirements. However, I respect the fact that when you have investors coming in saying they're going to take advantage of historic preservation tax credits, that can change project dynamics. On the other hand, they may be able to syndicate their tax credits out and sell them ahead of time and roll them into a down payment on a financing package. I assume you're well aware of that, having been in banking yourself. But I think the most important thing for everybody here to remember on historic preservation is if there is no local historic preservation ordinance, then there is no requirement to follow the historic preservation standards when you're rehabilitating a historic building. I deal with this all the time, and especially in our downtown, because we have a lot of historic buildings that are being rehabilitated, and most of them, in fact, almost all of them, do not use historic preservation tax credits or follow that process. These are people who are working with buildings that exist. A land bank, in cases where you might be dealing with a historic structure, if there's no LHPO, local historic preservation ordinance in effect, I don't see any reason why the land bank would suddenly require following guidelines that are stricter than what the municipality requires. And I think to close out, I really want to reflect on something that is really the genesis of this bill. In places like Millinocket, East Millinocket, Lincoln, Livermore Falls, Baileyville with the Louisiana Pacific Oriented Strand Board plant, Orono with Street Art Textile. All of these communities were basically left to handle this change and this loss on their own. That's state policy in Maine right now. If you lose your mill or you lose your major industrial employer and you have a contaminated site, in effect, you're on your own. And I think that's not healthy for rural communities who are vulnerable and at their worst moment and at their lowest low, to have people look at them and say, we can help you with some brownfield funding if you have a viable redevelopment proposal, which is required in brownfields. But there's no real pot of money out there to help address faster redevelopment. I toured one of the facilities I just mentioned in this list recently, and that is not under active redevelopment. And it is being scrapped at a pace that is roughly going to take 20 years for this facility to be torn down and then eventually turned into flat earth and maybe cleaned up. And the community in the meantime gets to have the site of a building getting torn down. I apologize, I'm going on too long.
Yeah, we
But
don't
anyways,
want to get back into public hearing mode here.
yes, thank you. So I just really reflect a lot on the need that exists in communities which this bill will address. And I think it's substantial.
Thank you. Are there any other questions from Mr. O'Keefe? We appreciate your time. Thank you. I'll entertain any other requests for people to come in from the committee. Ms. Reed, if you could, there we go. She's ahead of me. So looking to the committee, if we are moving into discussion or we want to move into caucus. Ms. Olson.
I do have a few technical notes that I would like to share with the committee.
Absolutely.
If this is the right time.
Sure.
Okay. I noted a few of them as well. These are, again, just technical considerations as you consider what you've heard. I already mentioned the first one about the inclusion of the findings and declaration of necessity section that has a tendency to obfuscate the meaning of the substantive provisions. In reality, they're not necessary to the bill, and we may want to consider how we could reallocate some of that language. But it, of course, can also stay in. That's at the committee's pleasure. So just to note, that is unusual, but of course it is included in other legislation as well. So just to make you aware of that. We talked about definitions as well. So we've heard a lot about that, but just to note that the inclusion of some definitions may help with the clarity of the bill and the purpose of what's being established. I did want to also bring up the question of whether the term municipality is too limiting in its own definition. Of course, we know in our state that we have other entities that are not just municipalities, such as plantations or unorganized townships. So to consider that. I just want to remind everyone that if you look at it, the members of the Redevelopment Authority are appointed by the governor and they're confirmed by this committee. And with the addition of 2 new members to the Development Ready Community Planning, those 2 new members, we don't know who appoints them. So those will have to be similarly determined. And it also, in the Development Ready Committee, can submit legislation, but it doesn't say to whom. And the last thing is and this was referenced in discussion just recently, that the Development Ready Committee seems like a temporary committee. It's tasked with establishing guidelines. So it may not want to be written in as standing legislation if in fact its work was only to be temporary, to establish those guidelines and has no other established purpose. It may be better to consider an unallocated section to task the group to get together, to do the work, to submit the guidance and any necessary legislation to a specific entity by a certain date. So those are all things the committee could consider. as you move forward.
Representative Andrews?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for that. On top of what you said with the ability to submit legislation, I have in my notes, and I just wanted to verify that on top of submitting legislation, they can issue bonds as well as have limited liability. And they can also do tax increment financing. Is that correct?
So the Community Redevelopment Land Bank Authority can enter into intergovernmental agreements, agreements with federal agencies, can issue bonds and other obligations, can apply for grants, loans, and other financial assistance from the state or the federal government for these redevelopment or rehabilitation projects, the eminent domain that we've already discussed, and to submit legislation. And I think you said something about tax increment financing. Is that correct?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure I saw tips in there somewhere. It's a big bill. I just wanted to verify.
I will need to double check
that. Also, I saw a limited liability exemption in there, and there was a lot of.
Oh, yeah. Okay, so yeah, so sorry, limited liability section. So section 3 of both the bill and the amendment is adding to this limited exemption from liability the Community Redevelopment Land Bank Authority that's being established. So already the state or any political subdivision that acquires ownership or control of an oil storage facility through tax delinquency proceedings or through any similarly statutorily created procedure is exempt from liability, and it has some there's some details outlined there. So
what does that mean in just plain English?
I don't know the details of how the owner of a oil storage facility could be considered liable. My guess is if you acquired the property and it caused further harm or damage to either individuals or to the environment, that you can't be held liable for that. You weren't the one who caused it, but you did acquire the property sort of later on, and you acquired it through the tax delinquency proceeding or other similarly statutorily created procedure.
I guess my question for that is, would the liability fall back to the municipality?
Oh, no. No, I think my understanding, and I will need to double check this, but I believe it would fall back onto the original owner of the oil storage facility. But again, I would have to look into the liability. I'm not an expert in this section or in those matters. And I know, of course, it can get complicated. The question of liability in those situations can often be a question that is long left undetermined.
Yeah, I would just want to make sure that. I would just want to make sure that municipalities are protected for that kind of stuff.
Okay, and my understanding is that they are, but I'll double check on that.
Representative Austin.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This too is for our analyst. Did I mention last year anything about the McKinn site that was here in Gray? Did I mention that to you? You mentioned something else I had brought up.
You did talk about, sorry, right here. You did talk about some sites. The one that I remembered and noted was a question having to do with, I think it was the post office in town.
It could have been.
You did talk about another site. I'd have to go back and just look at my notes more closely, but you did bring up a couple.
Okay, that's something I can follow up on. It Representative Andrews' remarks brought it to mind because it has got to have been 40 years, I would say 43 years now since that incident happened there. And I'm just wondering how that would play out. But anyway, thank you.
Any other questions or comments from the committee? Representative Bernard.
Thanks so much, Chair Roberts. I wonder, would this be an appropriate time to ask for a caucus, not to mention we've been at this for nearly 2 hours, and I wonder if we could take a break to do other essential things, if you will.
I was moving towards there.
Thank you.
We are at 11:22 right now. How long do you think so we'll put like a 5-minute break, and then how long do you think we need for caucus?
I think we need at least 10 minutes.
Okay, well, let's just call it 20 and come back here at 11:45. Does that work?
Perfect. Yes,
And then
thank you so
we
much.
can talk towards the end of that on the phone. That gives us time to touch base. Okay. So back at 11:45, 5 minutes, and then to caucus for everyone. We have everybody. Ah, the blocks keep moving. Okay. 1, 2, 3, 4. Waiting for Senator Curry. Give it another 30 seconds because we do have a senator here. Okay, we'll start discussion. I'm sure Senator Curry will pop on. Representative Collmore and Bernard, I don't know who had their hand up first.
You can go with Representative Collmore. That's fine with me.
Okay.
Thank you, Representative Roberts. First, I'd like to just quickly say, I feel like we need like hold music or something so that when I reconnect my audio, I know that it's working, because it's like dead silent and I'm like, am I connected? I just wanted to say really quickly, as we reflect on everything we heard today and have had potentially a chance to review what happened in May, that I think this is an important bit of legislation in that it can really help benefit municipalities if it's done correctly. I can think in my hometown alone, 3 properties that could really benefit because of the just difficult time that it takes to make it so that something can be utilized or redone in this way. It's very extensive. It's very expensive to the taxpayers. I mean, one of the houses I'm thinking of in particular in my town has a tree growing up through the middle of it, and we still haven't been able to do anything about it. And with that said, though, I think that this needs just a little bit more work. There have been some concerns that have been brought up. We want to make sure that the home rule is very exclusively listed in the language in this. The last thing I would want to do is have my taxpayers and the municipality not be able to have the final say in whatever's done in the land that we oversee. So I do think that we need to work on some of the definitions, making sure they're clear in here and making it very clear that the municipalities are the ones who have to invite the state in for something like this. That's just my thoughts on this for right now. Thank you.
Representative Bernard.
Thanks very much, Chair Roberts. I just want to back up what Representative Collmore just said. I think that it's important that we take the time, that we take a breath, because the language, the new language, the amendments were just put before us earlier this morning. And so with that, if it's not out of order, I'd like to make a motion to table the bill pending further review by the committee. It would give us time to confer with our town councils, the county commissioners, for example. They may even want time to talk with their attorneys, not sure. But it would give us a moment to see the clarifications. We've requested a number of language clarifications that I think need to be in this bill before we vote on it. So I am requesting a tabling motion. I'd like to motion for a tabling at this moment.
I'd second it.
Madam Chair, may I request Representative Bernard, may I ask something of Representative Bernard?
Yes, sure. But we have a
Thank you.
motion in a second. We can discuss that now.
Oh, okay, great. Oh, yes. So wait a minute. A tabling motion, I don't think gets any discussion. It doesn't get a discussion. And that's why I would request Representative Bernard to withdraw the motion if she's open to it, so that we can ask everything we want of Rachel, and then come back to, otherwise we're done with this bill. I think it just, parliamentary wise, if we could ask, we can continue the discussion of asking what we need from Rachel and then come back to the motion. I support the motion. I support the tabling motion. I just wanted to make sure that we have an opportunity to ask Rachel for what we need. It's at your discretion. The motion's on the floor. So you would either need to withdraw or we just move forward, and then we would move on to the next bill.
I would like very much to work with this committee.
Mhm.
And so therefore, questions that are out there that you have for Ms. Olson, I think they should be asked, and then let's move very quickly to my motion. That's how I will say yes to that.
So are you temporarily
And
withdrawing?
so therefore, I will temporarily withdraw my motion, my motion to table.
Senator
Same
Ray?
same on the second.
Okay, perfect. So questions for Ms. Olson, Senator Curry.
Yes, one of the things I would like to ask Ms. Olson is if she could research the question around municipalities. You brought up the question of municipalities, unincorporated, plantation, different, that there are different local entities. And if that was a question that you could research, and with the idea of bringing back to a future work session.
Yep. I can do that.
Representative Andrews.
Thank you. I would just add to that clarification on tax increment financing, what they can do explicitly. I'd also like to explore explicit language saying how a municipality would have to actively ask for this with help from the state. I'd like clarification as well on the eminent domain that we spoke about this morning, how we touched on that little addendum of language that didn't really change anything. I'd like a thorough analysis of that to see if the intent changed at all, or if that's just a little bit of window dressing through language. I'd also like some more clarification on who and what they can submit for legislation, what that would look like. If it would be on the same level as like a housing authority or some other quasi-government organization. And Representative Sachs touched on existing definitions for blighted, abandoned, environmentally hazardous, and functionally obsolete. I'd like to see what those are in statute. And I think furthermore, we might need to tailor those specifically to this bill, change the language for exactly what we want to do, just to really tighten down on the intent of this bill. I think the intent of this bill is good. I am just always worried about unintended consequences. And I think the more we can do to kind of rein in through language and statute, the straight and narrow for this bill, I think the better off we'll be. And I think that's it. And further explanation of limited liability and how that would impact municipalities. We might need to add language saying explicitly that municipalities will be exempted from liability if they engage with the state for any kind of real estate transaction, something like that. And also, I might have missed it, but I don't know if there's a fiscal note on this guy. I think that's probably important as well. I think we need to explore the funding. I know federal tax dollars have been mentioned, and I'd like clarification on whether or not that would be a one-time thing through ARPA or some other mechanism, or if this is sustainable, ongoing federal help, or once the ARPA money runs out, will state taxpayers be on the hook to fill that gap for this authority that we're creating? I think it's an important question to ask. And I think that's enough on your plate, so I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Okay, I'm just going to jump in there. No, there's not a fiscal note yet. I did note sort of what things might be considered when drafting the fiscal note. There is a funding source identified in the bill through the construction debris payment that contractors pay when they take construction debris to a dump, for example. So there's that. And then I'll look more in at sort of what that federal funding looks like. But the idea is that there is federal funding for land banks, which I believe is a grant or an application process, but I'll bring more information about that back.
Thank you. Is there any way to get projections of what that added fee for tonnage would be? I mean, a couple bucks here and there doesn't seem like that much to me. I don't know if that would be enough to, if it is enough to sustain things, great. If not, I think that's something we should be aware of, because that gap will be filled with tax dollars.
Okay, and I am looking into your liability question, but I'll just note for anyone who wants to look, if you look at the whole section under Title 38, chapter 13B. That's a whole section on uncontrolled hazardous substance sites and the liability around that. And there's a definition for responsible party. It's a little long and complicated, so I'd only gotten like halfway through it before we got back. So that is the section it's referring to.
Is that something we would want to expand on for other types of potential contamination? I know mills and like decertified mills were mentioned for stuff like that. I don't know if that falls under it. But if we can get this, shaped up to help communities that have mills that are gone and need to clean up those sites, maybe we can incorporate language for whatever kind of contamination those sites would have. I don't know if it's similar to what's mentioned in the statute already, but something to think about.
Ms. Olson, you ready for me to move on to the next person? You have all that?
I'm ready.
Okay. Representative Collmore.
Thank you very much. In addition to everything that John just listed, one of the things that I would like to clear up as well is the temporary or permanent extent of the committee. You had brought up that as a potential concern. It looks like it might be temporary, but is it actually permanent? So if we could clear that up. And he actually covered almost everything else on my list, and so did Senator Curry with the clarification of townships and unorganized territories as well. Thank you.
Okay, you're welcome. I'll just note that was that's actually, I'm not sure I can bring much information back on that question. I think that's up to the committee to decide on. Just as it's stated, it says the purpose of the Development Ready Community Planning Committee is the purpose of developing guidelines and practices in community development for communities which request them, and that they shall develop guidelines intended to support the following goals, and then it lists 3 goals. So it seems temporary in nature, given the description of its purpose. And so that's something for the committee to decide on what kind of language for that should be included, whether it should be statutorily assigned, or if something like an unallocated section telling the same group to go do the same work and report back at the same time might be more appropriate. So I'm not sure, there's not a whole lot more I can bring back on that. That's the decision that's up to the committee. If you were to give more authority to that group or want them to reassess or reevaluate over time, that would change the purpose. So any changes to the purpose would change your interpretation of how it should be allocated to statute.
If I may, I guess what I'm looking for, Ms. Olson, is the different avenues the committee can take potentially on this to not change the purpose, but ensure that if somebody in a municipality has questions, they have somebody they can go to.
Representative Austin.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Gee, everybody's doing a great job. So let me just, I hope I'm going to be on target here. But Rachel, would it be possible for you to keep a running list of the things that perhaps have been asked of you that you find you cannot answer, so that then the committee will be sure to address it? That would be one thing.
Yeah, I'll bring back I will formulate all of these into questions. I put all of these into questions. I'll provide the answers that I have, and I'll indicate either questions that were things I can't answer for you, or if I was unable to find specific information, I'll of course note that.
Perfect.
I
think that'll be a big help to us. The second thought, I don't think Representative Andrews had that in his list, but I know during our discussion, we mentioned how and who makes the decision on the appointees to this board or committee, whatever we're calling it. Is there language? I don't think there was any language on how that comes about. Is there? What process someone would get I don't know, their name submitted to someone and they would be considered to be on the board? I know we added the transportation, and who else was the second vote?
Yep. So we're talking about, I think, just to be clear, we're sort of talking about the 2 different groups that are being created at the state level. The Community Redevelopment Land Bank Authority, and that has 9 members that are appointed by the governor and subject to the review by the Joint Standing Committee of the Legislature having jurisdiction over economic and community development matters, which is currently this committee. So those are, and then there are a series of ex officio members. These are the commissioners or directors of state agencies, and they are non-voting members of that authority. So no one's appointed or approved. They're just there.
Okay.
So that's that one.
Can I just right now, while I can hang on to it, upon that, is housing a part of that? Would that,
there's a designated broker member of a statewide real estate commission. There's someone responsible for community redevelopment as an employee of a state chartered bank. A full-time municipal economic and community development director, someone responsible for urban and regional planning, full-time professional, and a person with experience in the development of residential communities and housing development. So quite a number of individuals with some expertise in the area of housing.
I guess I'd ask the committee if they would consider, would they think that the housing, actually the housing authority be a good resource there?
Sorry, those were just the appointed members. The director of the Maine State Housing Authority or their designee is one of the ex officio non-voting members.
Okay, that's, so they, along with transportation, were the.
Yes, Maine State Housing was always there. Transportation and the director of the Maine Historic Preservation Commission was added.
All right, thank you. I think I'm set.
Representative Hassenfuss.
First, I wanted to thank the bill sponsor for this, and everybody out there has done a tremendous amount of work on this. I do think this is a really well done bill, especially given that it's a very big, heavy lift and a huge area to cover. In general terms, I like it. I haven't heard much opposition to it. I think we should move forward with something like this. But I do hear the concern of the committee and tend to agree if we can tighten it up as best we can, that'd be great. My couple of quick questions, and this is just general questions for anybody listening. One is under section 5156, creation of municipal authorities. Should we dictate how the municipal authorities want to establish their commission? Should we specifically dictate who they should have for commissioners and how exactly they should do that? That's a question. I'm open, to go either way on that, which is a question as to why we think that's the best way to do it, or if another way would be better. And in addition to that, I'm wondering how this will solve the problem of the property that was discussed earlier by Representative Ducharme, and I know a lot of us have had experience with this, but there's a property that's owned by a bank. It's been in foreclosure. We don't really know who the owner is. How is this itself going to expedite that process? Is that where the eminent domain process is really going to be a clutch for the people with this, or is there going to need to be more legislation later brought back to us to address that? I'm just curious about that. That's not necessarily going to dictate my vote on this, but and finally, we establish this agency, or by the actual term of it would be authority. So we establish this authority. It consists of a chair and vice chair among the voting members there. It's going to adopt its own bylaws. And then it shall hire an executive director and may hire staff. Should we dictate that it shall hire? Because what happens if years down the road, for some reason, this doesn't get funding and it's still via the legislature, it says that you have to have an executive director. And along with that, the Development Ready Community Planning Committee, should we give rulemaking authority to this group? Or should we just have this planning committee say, get your bylaws put together, get, your recommendations and your guidelines, and then the chair and vice chair and their staff are going to use that as sort of their, charter moving forward? Is that enough direction, or, should we give more direction as far as, the day-to-day process of this authority? So those are just some thoughts. I'm fine the way it's written, but I was just opening up the conversation when we come back. So those are just a few things that I'm throwing out there. But all in all, thanks very much for this. I think it looks good. And I'm sure that if this is implemented, we'll need to do some tweaks. And I'm glad to see that there's that legislative provision there where this group can come back to us with recommendations for how to make it better.
Ms. Olson, you have all that?
I think I do. I'll just note, I'm not sure exactly how much more Representative Hassens is maybe wanting, or I know you put this out as a question to consider. So I'll just say that under the creation of municipal authorities, it does say that the commissioners must be residents of the municipality, some of whom have experience in real estate development, historic building rehabilitation, banking, or finance and community planning. So it does have some stipulations. It's relatively broad, but it does have some. And it does tell you how many to appoint and sort of initial appointments as well.
Okay. Yeah, and my question is, should we be that prescriptive, or should we allow the towns to appoint who they want?
Okay, thank you for that clarification.
Representative Geiger.
Thank you, Chair Roberts. Just a couple of quick things. In the initial testimony back in May, the DEP estimated that the change in construction fee would bring in about $1 million to $1.5 million a year. Second thing is just in terms of definitions, townships and plantations are run by counties. They are not incorporated, but counties in this bill can enter into a land bank. So I think that issue is taken care of. Finally, I'd like to say this is a very complicated bill. Representative Sachs spent months meeting with all kinds of stakeholders, the governor's office, MMA, various departments within government. And I think I would recommend, and I know that Representative Sachs is more than willing to meet with Rachel to go through all these points, because some of them have already been thought of or answered.
Senator Searway.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I was just thinking, seems like, we're building another whole entity when we have Maine State Housing Authority. Why isn't we can't have an offshoot from that instead of doing this whole big thing, which is going to be more costly? It just seems like there's a lot of stepping. You're kind of like doubling the effort, and then you're adding to it, and it's like, it seems like it could be simplified. I guess I don't know who that question should go to, but
Senator Curry.
Thank you, Chair Roberts. I want to honor my comments earlier to Representative Bernard, and My intention was to give us time to ask what we need to ask of the bill sponsor and of the analyst, and also have the bill sponsor hear what we've had to say. So I would move to table this bill.
I will second that.
We have a motion and a second. Do we need to call the roll? Or we can just do a show of hands on favor of tabling?
Oh, I'm sorry. It would be better given the format if we could do roll calls. It's just, it's purely because of our remote. It's just easier, I think. I don't know the parliamentary answer to that. I'm just saying it's easier for both our clerks and myself and anyone who goes back to watch the video if we do it the other way. So not parliamentary, just purely a suggestion.
Okay, Ms. Reed, can you call the roll for the tabling motion, please?
Representative Geiger,
Yes.
Representative Andrews,
Yes.
Representative Collmore,
Yes.
Representative Ducharme,
Yes.
Senator Searway,
Yes.
Representative Pebworth,
Yes.
Representative Austin,
Yes.
Representative Bernard,
Yes.
Representative Hassenfuss,
Yes.
Representative LaRochelle,
Yes.
Representative Roberts,
Yes.
Senator Curry.
Yes.
We have a unanimous tabling motion for LD 1694. And with that, I will close the work session. For LD 1694, we have 2 more work sessions, but being mindful of the hour, looking to people for lunch, is 40 minutes sufficient?
Yes, could that go a little shorter, even 30 minutes, just looking at everything else where I have to go?
Yeah. Is everybody good with coming back at 12:45? No issues there. Okay. We will be on a brief recess.
Thank you. still chewing, but I'm back and choking.
Should I do hold music? Do, 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 do.
Thanks, Jack.
Why do we always choose the Jeopardy tune when we do that? But we do.
Hey, welcome back, everyone. It is 12:46, and just a reminder that we are still in work session mode. And with that, I'd like to open the work session for LD 1810, an act regarding examinations and applications for professional engineers and engineer interns, which is Senator Curry's bill. And with that, I will hand it over to Ms. Olson.
Okay, good afternoon. We're looking at LD 1810, an act regarding examinations and applications for professional engineers and engineer interns. So this bill moves from the section of law related to examinations to the section related to applications, the requirement that an applicant for licensure as a professional engineer or certification as an engineer intern reapply if the application process is not completed within 5 years, and updates language to clarify the requirements. It also removes the requirement that the application form must be furnished by the State Board of Licensure for professional engineers. And the bill also eliminates the requirement that an applicant complete a period of mandated engineering work experience before the applicant is allowed to sit for the principles and practices of engineering examinations. So it doesn't change the requirements. It just says you don't have to do the work experience first before sitting for the exam. You can take the exam at any point while you are working. You will already have taken the fundamentals exam and be working. Individuals who testified in favor here, and I have a brief summary of their points. And I'll just note, as I mentioned, it doesn't change the requirements for licensure as a professional engineer. 27 other states have made this change already, and Mr. Jackson spoke about that during his testimony, and he's the executive director of the Board of Licensure for Professional Engineers. No testimony was provided in opposition, neither nor against. I have one note about a potential issue or technical problem, and I have it outlined here, but the new language indicates that an applicant who failed to complete the application process within the 5 years must reapply and must submit 3 references, that's the key, from professional engineers that are current at the time of reapplication. If we were to look back at the section related to the qualifications for licensure as a professional engineer or certification as an engineer intern, they lay out different recommendation requirements. So in the original section about qualifications, a professional engineer needs 5 references, 3 of which must be from licensed professional engineers, and an engineer intern requires only 3, and they are character references, which I would say is a distinguishing difference from a licensed professional engineer. So there's incongruity between the original qualifications section and the newly added language. And I put the whole statute in, and the preliminary fiscal impact statement has been issued, and there is preliminarily no fiscal impact. Yeah, okay, that's what I have for you.
Do we have questions for Ms. Olson, or can we go to Senator Curry now? Seeing none. Senator Curry, floor is yours if you want to address the technical issue, perhaps.
Thank you, Chair Roberts. I would ask that we invite either Commissioner Head, or maybe we could start with Commissioner Head, to see if she has any problem with if there's any reason not to have the reapplication be 5 professional engineers. For the reapplication reference requirement to be 5 professional engineers.
He's in limbo. Good afternoon, Commissioner. Can you hear us? Not yet.
Appears to be an extra long limbo.
Representative Roberts, it might be the case that it's on in the background and she's not at her desk. I just saw her in the attendee list.
Okay, Ms. Reed, can you move Ms. Cohen over then? And we'll see who pops in first, I guess. Good afternoon, Ms. Cohen. How are you?
I'm great. How are you?
Good. We're waiting on the commissioner. She doesn't seem to be popping. Oh, I think I spoke.
Well, and I can probably help, although of course I'll defer to Commissioner Head, but I'm guessing that this is really a question for David Jackson with the Professional Engineering Board.
Okay, the commissioner's on now, so.
And yes, I concur with Joan Cohen. This is really the Engineers Board bill. And I'm sure David is waiting to speak to you, but just from my perspective, I thought it was an acceptable bill. I had no issues with it, but you really do need to hear from David Jackson.
I don't see him in the attendee list.
I'm going to go off video and see if I can text him.
Okay.
I know this bill has had a long development period. So this is sort of the second time that it has been before the committee. We talked to David several times in the run-up to the public hearing, and we were certainly satisfied that he had addressed all of the comments that came his way. But there again, we can't speak for an affiliated board in this context. So hopefully he's right handy.
While we're waiting, do committee members have any questions for Senator Curry or for the commissioner while we're kind of in limbo ourselves? No. Okay, we'll give it a minute. Oops. Senator Seaway, was that your physical hand up? There we go.
Just to add a quick question on this. So basically, they become licensed once they fulfill everything, take the test earlier, basically, right?
That is correct, yes.
So just and then they just go through the same avenue basically, but just able to take it sooner, the test.
That's correct. They don't have to wait 4 years or whenever all of the requirements have been fulfilled, since they may be in a better position to take the exam earlier than that based on their personal situations.
Yeah. All right, thank you.
Sure.
Ms. Cohen.
I just wanted to report that I did connect with David Jackson and he should be joining imminently.
Perfect.
Oh.
Okay, we will just hold on a moment then. Ms. Reed, when Mr. Jackson joins, if you could just put him right into the panelist room, that would be great. Thank you. Senator Curry?
Sorry, my hand is up accidentally.
Okay. Is that on purpose, Senator Curry? Okay.
Thank you. It is. Thank you, Chair Roberts. I'm trying to find the OPLA review, and I'm not seeing it in committee materials. Am I missing it? The OPLA analysis?
It was emailed to us. It's not in the, it's
Yes.
not in the portal. It was in
So-
your email this morning.
So bill
Thank you very
analyses
much.
are emailed out.
Ms. Reed, I think you can probably move the commissioner back out. We'll keep Ms. Cohen in for right now and in case we don't see Mr. Jackson momentarily. Senator Curry, is your hand still lingering? Okay. There we go.
Do we need a hand raised jar as well as a mute jar?
Good afternoon, Mr. Jackson. How are you?
Good afternoon. My apologies. It took longer to get a lunch than I thought.
That's okay. Are you aware of the question that's on the table now as far as what might be a technical issue with the bill?
No.
Okay, either Ms. Olson, Senator Curry?
Would you like me to?
Please, Ms. Olson.
Okay, so again, this is just a potential issue that I wanted to run by just to make sure that we're all understanding it. So if we're looking at the screen here, I pulled this out of the bill. So the change here says an applicant who fails to complete the application process within 5 years must reapply to the board, meet qualification requirements that are in effect at the time of the new application, submit updated documentation of engineering work experience, and submit 3 references from professional engineers that are current at the time of the new application. So my only note is that an applicant refers to both a professional engineer applicant and a certification as an engineer intern applicant, and that in the original qualifications section, the requirement for professional engineers is 5 references, 3 of which must be from licensed professional engineers, and that an engineer intern has to submit 3 character references. So I just wanted to point out that it's incongruous, and if that's on purpose, that's okay too. I just wanted to point it out.
Mr. Jackson, would you like that to stay up on the screen or?
Yeah, that's fine. Well, that's a good question.
We can take it down if you'd like or leave it up.
No, it's fine. It's fine.
Okay.
I certainly have, I have some suggestions, but there's sort of different ways to go depending on what the intent was.
The intent, well, so the reality is that we never have this issue with engineer interns. So engineer interns I don't think we've ever had the issue where we've had to differentiate. So the big issue is professional engineers allowing their applications to lapse, which is part of the reason for the statute change in the first place. This shift with the other section of it, having people wait to apply for licensure until they actually pass the exam. That way we don't keep applications open for multiple years until they pass the exam. So what was your suggestion, Ms. Olson?
With the leave of the chairs?
Yes.
Okay. So depending on how you wanted to approach it, I mean, I think this is really could be a relatively simple language change. I'm assuming although you said you don't normally have this issue with engineer interns, it still applies to them if that was the case?
Right.
Okay. So I'd leave the term "an applicant," and I would just explain in the section about references that for applicants for professional engineers, they need to submit. I'm not sure if you want the 5, like all 5 new references, or just the 3 from licensed professional engineers to be new, and the other 2 are fine.
Right. We only care about the 3 from professional engineers for the PE applicants.
Okay, so then if you are fine keeping the original, of the 5, the 2 that don't come from professional engineers, keeping them, and we just say that they will submit 3 new references that are current from professional engineers, and I would just add, and that engineer interns must submit 3 new character references that are current at the time of application.
Just 3 new references.
Yeah, you use character references under qualifications. Right. I would just repeat the phrasing.
The same language.
Yeah.
Okay.
That would be
fine.
one way to do that.
Ms. Olson, can you pop that down so I can see everything? Thank you. I believe, there we go. Okay, Representative Andrews, sorry about that.
Thank you. I'm gonna have to ask you, Ms. Olson, to put that back up because I have a question on the language. Instead of 3 character references, which I think is kind of open to interpretation, would it make more sense to say an applicant must submit 3 engineering or educational references with the application? It's a little more nuts and bolts than something that's open to interpretation. I think that could be even used to discriminate if the people have relationship issues with whomever. I think that's something we should change in the bill.
Is that a question for Mr. Jackson or for Ms. Olson?
It's just an idea I'm throwing out there. I think it's something we should do, but if either one would like to comment on it, I'd be happy to hear it.
Let's go to Mr. Jackson first. You have thoughts on that?
Right. Well, so I would say we could just say 3 references. And they could be any kind of references, because most often they are either people who have been instructors in the person's engineering program or people they are currently working with. So I think it would be fine for us either way. The reason that character reference was put in there rather than engineering references, because some of these individuals are in their senior, applying just after graduating. So they aren't working yet. So they're not, and they were, many of them were afraid they had to get PE references. And so they were trying to find engineers who could act as references for them, and that's not necessary. And so,
I'd be very happy if we could just put references. I think that works. Keep it simple.
Any other questions from the committee? Representative Austin. You're on mute.
Thank you, Madam Chair. David, I couldn't see that in that particular question that Representative Andrews had brought into mind. This test, what's the format for this test? Is it in any way divided into sections like a CPA certification tests so that they could get some and then they still can come back and get more. And I was just thinking about how that's formatted and then the timeline, whether or not they can.
There are
Go ahead,
two
you can help me.
examinations. The first examination is the fundamentals of engineering examination that a prospective engineer takes either in their senior year of college or after graduating. The second examination is the principles and practice of engineering exam, and they take that at some point during their experience, traditionally after they've completed their experience requirements. So the format of both exams now is computer-based. The fundamentals of engineering examination is a 6-hour exam, and the principles and practice of engineering exam is an 8-hour exam. And so they're split into 2 blocks, morning and afternoon. And either there's a general engineering section in the, could happen to you either way. It could be morning or afternoon. And then in the specific discipline that you're testing in, that's the other block with a break in between. And they're multiple choice questions with the reference material on the screen. So it's a 24-inch screen, and there are 2 pages on the screen. One is the exam and the other is reference material.
So to what my question might be is, can they get through one piece and then if the other one is not successful, the first one still stands?
That's
Or is
correct.
that-
So if they
Okay.
pass once you pass either exam, once you pass the fundamentals of engineering exam, it's good for life.
Okay.
And every single state accepts that exam. So it doesn't matter where somebody took the exam or when they took it. Once you pass that, it's valid for the rest of your life.
Okay.
And then the same is true for the principles and practice of engineering exam, except that in some states, if you stop practicing for 5 years or more, they require you to test before you come back into full practice. Maine does not have that requirement.
Great. Thank you very much.
Anyone else? To entertain a motion? I have 3 up at the same time. I think Representative Collmore, I believe you were first.
Thank you very much. I would like to make a motion ought to pass as amended with the clarification language presented by Ms. Olson.
Okay, there's a motion on the table. Is there a second?
Second.
And a second. Okay, Ms. Reed, can you take the roll? We have an ought to pass as amended. And Ms. Olson, you're clear on the language.
I'm clear on the language. I just had one question. We're going to go with with references when referring to certified engineer interns. So what I wasn't clear on is in the original statute for qualifications, section 1352-A, am I striking the word character?
Representative Andrews.
That's what I would prefer, if that's okay with folks. I think that would help me get this across the finish line.
Representative Collmore, you'd like to amend?
I will include that in my motion.
Senator Seaway? You're good? Okay. Any further discussion on this? Okay, Ms. Reed, can you call the roll?
Representative Geiger,
Yes.
Representative Andrews,
Yes.
Representative Collmore,
Yes.
Representative Ducharme,
Yes.
Senator Searway,
Yes.
Representative Pebworth,
Yes.
Representative Austin,
Yes.
Representative Bernard,
Yes.
Representative Hassenfuss,
Yes.
Representative LaRochelle,
Yes.
Representative Roberts,
Yes.
Senator Curry,
Yes.
and Senator Lucchini is absent.
Okay, so we have 12 in favor, 0 opposed. So that is ought to pass as amended. And the votes having been taken, I will now close the work session on 1810 and open the work session on 1811 and act to provide for the 2022 and 2023 allocations of the state ceiling on private activity bonds.
Thank you all.
Thank you. Ms. Olson?
Okay, I'm off mute. I've already had to put a little bit in the jar from earlier. And, okay, big enough? Bigger, big enough?
That's good for
Okay.
me.
I'll make it bigger. Okay, so LD 1811, an act to provide for the 2022 and 2023 allocations of the state ceiling on private activity bonds. It establishes the allocations on the state ceiling on issuance of tax exempt private activity bonds for calendar years 22 and 23 among the state level issuers of tax exempt bonds. Brief summary of the testimony provided in support. No testimony was provided in opposition or neither for nor against. I'll just note this bill is brought annually. The rules for the use of the bond cap are set forth in Internal Revenue Code. So pretty strict rules that are already outlined. There's no general obligation bonding on the responsibility or responsibility on the part of the state. No cost to the state, helps for economic activity. And that the groups that are responsible, the issuers, do get together to decide how their recommendations for allocations. And as I noted, this is a bill that we have annually. You had this in front of you last session as well. And all of the bond issuers are in unanimous support of this authorizing legislation. There's no fiscal statement that's been issued yet. Last year, the preliminary fiscal impact statement was no net effect on general or moral obligation debt, so I would expect the same. I did include the statute, if you're interested, an overview of private activity bonds from the Congressional Research Service and the bulletin that outlines the caps. So private activity bonds volume cap for calendar year 2022 as outlined here. Don't have much to share in this one.
Okay. Senator Curry, did you have anything you wanted to add?
I just want to state that the effect of our raising the ceiling last year is being observed and having a groundbreaking for one of the projects that was funded, which is the a project that Representative Ducharme is quite familiar with, and I've been working with on, and that is the groundbreaking for the Go Labs Timber HP project in the former Madison Mill. And so that's an exciting, sometimes we don't always see the outcomes of our work, and that's related to this bond ceiling package.
Thank you. Representative Ducharme.
Thank you, Chairman Roberts. If it's appropriate, I would make a motion that we accept this bill as written.
Okay, we have ought to pass a motion. Second, Senator Searway.
Yep.
If we have any further discussion. Ms. Olson?
I'll just note that last year there was a fiscal note issued, even though the fiscal note read no net effect, but there was a fiscal note attached, which automatically makes it an ought to pass as amended. So with your permission, Representative Ducharme, it would be ought to pass as amended, anticipating the fiscal note.
Yeah.
Senator Searway, is that okay with you?
Yeah. Yeah.
Any other discussion? Seeing none. Ms. Reed, can you call the roll?
Representative Geiger,
Yes.
Representative Andrews,
No.
Representative Collmore,
Yes.
Representative Ducharme,
Yes.
Senator Searway,
Yes.
Representative Pepworth,
Yes.
Representative Austin,
Yes.
Representative Bernard,
Yes, sorry.
Yeah, I'm not sure if Representative Chair Roberts, have you frozen?
Oh, I guess I did, yes.
Representative Hassett,
Yes.
Representative LaRochelle,
Yes.
Representative Roberts,
You already called me.
Senator Curry,
Yes.
Okay, so we have 11 in favor and 1 opposed. The motion passes.
And Representative Andrews, what would you like your minority report to be?
Just so not to pass.
Thank you.
Okay, with all votes having now been taken, I will close the work session for LD 1811 and turn to Ms. Olson and see if you have anything for us. Generally speaking.
I do not, I don't, no.
I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
Move to adjourn?
Second.
Great. All in favor? We can do hands for this. Thursday.